Minister for Culture, Communications and Sport, Patrick O'Donovan, what does today's announcement reflect on the government's commitment to women in sport in Ireland?
Well, it reflects an ongoing investment over the last number of years that we've been putting in, because we know we're not living in an ideal world, because we know that for whatever reason, and there's a multiplicity of reasons, that participation is still challenging for a lot of young women and a lot of young girls. So this is about investing in the national governing bodies of sport to make sure that we continue to have that level of participation, that we grow it, and that we grow the presence of women's sports, both in terms of community-based and non-competitive based, but also in terms of competitive-based sport as well. And to have that investment, over the last number of years is a signal of the government's intent, and we want to grow that into the future. And that's my intent over the next number of years while I'm Minister for Sport.
And are there certain areas or projects this year that will be receiving funding that might not have been a focus in the past?
Yeah, so Sport Ireland and the national governing bodies will lay out that, but I suppose from my point of view, and I've discussed this with the Chief Executive of Sport Ireland and the board when I became Minister, I was in this department previously as Minister of State, and the last time I was here, I put a big emphasis on governance and the fact that there were very few women representing the national governing bodies at board level. Now what I want to see is a greater level of participation on our TV screens and attendances and things like that as well. So we have to invest to make the sports attractive for audiences and for attendees. And we've seen over the last number of years, whether it's in relation to athletics, camogie, ladies Gaelic football, they can hold their own with anybody. We just need to see more emphasis placed on it, broadcasters, yourselves, print media, to make sure that we get equality for sports regardless of the gender. And I think that's going to be very important. It's certainly going to form a plank of the sports policy that our department is going to do in the next 12 months, and we have started that process already.
We've seen such an increase in investment, funding, visibility, members of females on boards. How do you make sure now that doesn't plateau after such a continued rise in growth?
Well, you're right, you can't take anything for granted, and you have to constantly stretch it to the limit. And yeah, like some boards were dragged kicking and screaming to the concept of 40% for board membership for women. To be honest about it, I think that we should be doing this, not because we have to, but because we want to. And I'm a father of two young girls, and whatever sport they take up in the future, they're both at the moment playing Gaelic football and camogie, at under sixes. They're going to want to have the opportunities that maybe women that went before them didn't have, and that's multifaceted. It means investing in facilities. So the sports capital scheme has to continue. The large-scale sports investment fund has to continue. There also has to be role models for women, not only in terms of participation, but the people who you see giving out the cups on All Ireland Sundays and things like that. So we need to see a generational shift and a generational change. That's not going to be easy, but I think it is something that is achievable. And I think that single organisations where there is no difference between a man and a woman going forward will be really, really, I think, positive, and it'll do an awful lot in terms of participation.
Would that be a nod now towards integration between the GA, LGFA and camogie, hopefully?
Yeah. Look, they've already set out their stall, and they're on a pathway to do that. I'm a huge fan of that because at the moment, there is issues with regards to basic membership and entitlement, with regard to fields. Some people are brilliant and they already operate at one club position, and the president of the GA has been adamant this is the trajectory that he wants to move to. And I think, Mary McAleese's work has been fantastic. And the sooner it happens, really, the better. And I know that the government will support it. And I use that phrase loosely. This is a big transition for all three organisations, but we won't be found wanting when they make that transition.
And just in line with that, resources is something that always come up in a lack of. Casement Park, we've heard a lot about it over the last number of hours. Can you shed any light on?
Yeah, so look, the government here in this jurisdiction were first out of the traps with regard to a commitment to Casement Park. It was to be part of the Euros. We know that didn't happen, but it has to have a future. Ulster GA needs a home. Ulster hurling, football, camogie and ladies Gaelic football needs a home, but as well as that there's a community dividend here as well, and we're very strong on this. I was in Casement Park not too long ago with the president of the GA and the Ulster Council. It's a very sad place at the moment. It is in dire need of being developed. Over the last number of years, I would safely say that an awful lot of the investment that's on the table has been whittled away with inflation. We now need to come to a conclusion fairly quickly. I'll be meeting the GA tomorrow and we'll see where it goes from there. But look, as a government, we're very committed to Casement Park. We've always been, and we will continue with that commitment because it is an integral part of the community, and it isn't just for Gaelic games. We'll be very clear on this. It's for the cross community, and it is slap bang inside in the middle of the city, and as I say, at the moment it's quite a sad looking place, and as part of anything else, part of urban regeneration and as part of community regeneration, it has to be done, and I think it'll enhance the whole area economically, culturally, and every other way, and I think it can't but be a power for good in the city and for the wider province in Ulster.
And on a final note, as a Limerick man, what did you make of the penalty shootout at the weekend?
Well, look, it was a draw and it was a fabulous game, and I would agree with the president of the GA. I think provincial finals and All-Ireland finals should not go to penalties. It was an absolutely unbelievable display when you think that all these lads had to turn out for work the following day, unlike a lot of their contemporaries, who might be in another jurisdiction, earning millions. All these fellas had to go to work the following day and prepare themselves for another match. There was no losers on the day, and I think they should have left it at that. I think it should have gone to a replay, and I would hope in the future, and I know that Jarlath Byrne said this as well, provincial finals, particularly in Munster, there's something really special about Munster hurling, and there's particularly something special about it over the last number of years. Everybody that was there last weekend would have given their right arm to go to Páirc Uí Chaoimh next Saturday or Sunday to avenge that result. But sure, look, we might have an opportunity at some stage in the future.
Dr. Úna May, what does today's announcement reflect from the government's commitment to women in Irish sport?
Well, today is a really important day for women in sport in Ireland. It reflects, from our point of view, it's the 20th year of the Women in Sport programme, but it's not just about the 20 years, it's about the innovative and creative opportunities that are being provided for women and girls and teenagers and people from all walks of life to try out a diversity of sports. There are programmes that have been created here that provide for people from everything from coaching to leadership, from male allyship to really innovative programmes in pitch and putt. They're doing greenkeeping and turf management. In Motorsport Ireland, they're doing course design work. So we've moved on, we've evolved from the days where it was just about getting people more active, involved in sport. Now we're reaching out to all aspects of sport and making sure that women can have an impact everywhere in sport.
Absolutely. You've mentioned that this is the 20th anniversary of the funding. I know it's probably hard to choose, but is there something over the last 2 decades that you're particularly proud of or you think has made a particular difference?
Well, we have made a huge impact when it comes to teenage girls. This was identified as a gap. We did research, and this is something that I'm very committed to, is ensuring that everything we do is evidence and research based. And we did carry out research and we identified what were the barriers for teenage girls, because all of our annual or ongoing research had identified that a lot of teenage girls drop out of sport. So we've really targeted that, and we've put a big drive behind that, and we have a fantastic campaign called Her Moves, which targets teenage girls, and it addresses all aspects of the barriers that teenage girls feel and makes them more welcome. We want to get them into sport, we want to keep them in sport, and we want to get them involved in all aspects of sport, everything from coaching and officiating to leadership and board positions in the future, hopefully.
And Minister, how does today's announcement reflect the government and sport's commitment to women in sport in Ireland?
Well, we want us to see, and as a government, make sure that everyone across all genders and all parts of the country and all ability levels as well and all age groups have the opportunity to participate in sport. And traditionally there has been a participation gap there between men and women, and that's why over 20 years ago now the government initiated dedicated funding for women in sport through Sport Ireland, and I think that's helped make a real impact in terms of working with our national sporting bodies to make sure that there's specific programmes in place that make sure that for women that there's the opportunity to participate in their chosen sport, and that it works in terms of that it meets their needs well, and we see the participation gap now down to 3%. So across society we want to see all participation from all groups grow, but also we don't want to see any participation gaps. So that's why we're continuing with the funding programme that's in place this year. It's a record funding commitment of €4 million. 50 of our national sporting bodies will benefit and avail from that and have programmes in place that's dedicated to making sure that participation gap is eliminated, and we want to see the progress that's been made continue.
And it seems to be almost a movement away from active participation because that's already happening, and more towards getting females into governing roles, leadership roles, and memberships on boards and officiating?
Yeah, like we've seen great progress, but there are still areas where female participation is much lower than it should be, and particularly in leadership roles and coaching roles, and refereeing, for example, as well, particularly coaching. So, working with the national sporting bodies, this funding is looking to target that in particular too, because that's really important in terms of having that leadership and that role models as well, and breaking down any of the barriers that have been there previously, because we know whenever you have equal participation from everyone in society, but particularly between genders, that's really important in terms of strengthening sport, as well as making sure everybody's having the opportunity to equally participate too. So this funding of €4 million will work really well, because we know that the funding we put into the programme over the last number of years has yielded results.
And just on funding, we've gotten news come in that the UK government has committed £50 million to the investment in Casement Park. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, well, listen, that's very welcome. It's something the Irish government are very committed to, and that's why we've committed €50 million ourselves a few months ago, or last year, from the Shared Island Fund towards the development of Casement Park. And I know it's a project the GAA will be looking to step out. I know the £50 million will be a really welcome commitment from the British government. It's something I know the GAA will now consider in terms of the funding commitment they have as to how they can move forward with that. But it's certainly something the Irish government has supported from the outset, and supported in terms of the funding commitment of €50 million that we've committed to it.
And it still looks like there's about €106 million of a gap now that will be left before the amount is needed. Is there something that you'll be doing, talking with the GAA, talking with the UK government?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, primarily now it'll be something for the GAA to consider in relation to the funding commitments they have, and what is possible within that, and how they can step the project forward. Certainly the Irish government wants to see the project proceed. We want to see Antrim have a home ground, but also Belfast have Casement Park very much part of its sporting offering. It has played a massive role in the history of the GAA in the island and in Northern Ireland. We want to see it play a really important role of the GAA and the sporting future of Northern Ireland too, and that's why we put such a strong Irish government commitment to that, and we look to see how we can continue to support that now in terms of its development.
And final quick question, penalties in the GAA, yes or no?
Listen, I think it's always, whenever you have such a wonderful match, it's great to see it come to a conclusion. You never want it to be with penalties, but I know the Munster final this past weekend was one for the ages, and on the plus side with penalties you do get a conclusion and a winner coming out of such a wonderful sporting match, yeah, on balance yes, but listen, hopefully we won't see too many of them, but what a wonderful spectacle of the weekend, and it's a great example of what hurling contributes, and what a wonderful game it is, not just in the national context but in the international context, and I look forward to seeing hopefully more matches like that over the summer ahead.
Michelle Tanner, thanks for joining me today. And just wondering, what does the announcement today of the funding from the government, how does that reflect the government's commitment to women in sport in Ireland?
I think it's incredible. We've got $4 million invested in women in sport projects for this year, the same as last year, but it's 20 years of investment. Over $300 million has been invested, and I just see that it's really starting to change the landscape in how women in sport projects and initiatives are being driven by the NGBs and the partners involved in the delivery of sport. So it's really making a difference, I think, at the ground level, but also encouraging women not just to participate in sport, but also to get involved in coaching and leadership roles, which are really important to the sports sector.
And you mentioned the NGBs and the LSPs there.
Yeah.
Are there any particular projects or initiatives this year that will be receiving funding that maybe haven't been a focus in previous years?
Yeah, I think it's probably being built on really strong foundations. So really we're starting to see more of an emergence of collaborative projects. So there's a few special projects in there where NGBs have come together to work together for the similar objectives, maybe to tackle some of the obstacles that women and girls experience in sport. So they're kind of really great to see a lot more of that development of collaborative work in the area of women in sport. but also enhancing some of the programs that may have existed before and encouraging more women to get involved in other aspects of sports that they might not think about doing, because stereotypically they might not be involved in coaching or officiating or in other aspects of the running of sport. So it's really good to see more and more of those projects emerging now.
Yeah, we see those are the 4 pillars that are outlined in the Women in Sport policy.
Yeah.
The active participation, leadership, governance, visibility and coaching and officiating.
Yeah.
There's probably been a bit of a focus more so in the past couple of years on participation and visibility. Are we making a move now more towards those other areas that have probably been not as important?
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I can understand why the focus initially would have been on participation, because we wanted to get more girls actively involved and physically active, you know, for the huge health benefits, but also for the importance of being engaged with sport. But now that we're seeing increases in participation, we also need to ensure that this whole sport ecosystem is nurtured and encouraged for girls to see that pathway into being coaches and challenge some of those barriers and the stereotypes that might be associated with girls and women in sport. So I think it's really important that women have a lot to contribute in our boardrooms, on the sidelines of our pitches and our courts and all of that. And I think it's really important to see that there's more confidence growing, and we're through the LSP's programs and the NGB's programs, that they're really making a lot of work and a lot of effort to encourage girls to educate, to get involved and to enjoy sport from a different perspective. And I think that creates longevity and sustainability for sport, that it's not just about initiatives, get out and play and then nothing happens after the 8 weeks of that initiative. These other strands look at the longevity and creating that sustainability for girls and women to stay involved in sport.
And just on that, the gender gap in participation, we see now that that's down to under 3%, same figure as 2023.
Yeah.
Were you surprised to see that it was the same figure, or are we still on track for equal participation in 2027?
Yeah, like we're still on track, but I think the important thing is we can't take our foot off the pedal, because as soon as we stop investing in women in sport and girls in sport, we're going to see that gap widen again. So part of our mission is to ensure that a lot of these initiatives and programs become part of the norm, and that, you know, we see the core investment reflects those initiatives and those programs into the future, because we can't keep running initiatives and programs. We have to make sure that they're sustainable, and we have to make sure that there's a pathway, whether it's a pathway for performance or whether it's a pathway into coaching or officiating. There's a pathway for girls and women to get involved.
And obviously, to this year marking 20 years investment in women in sport, I know there's probably so many to choose from, but do you have a particular one in mind, or something that you think was a really big achievement over the last 2 decades?
Well, one that really hits notes with me is the Her Moves initiative, which a lot of the NGBs and LSPs have taken on board as well, and they've aligned their programs to that Her Moves, because I think if we don't reach young girls at a critical age in their formative years, at a teenage, the teenage years, I guess, are the ones where it's critical that girls might not stay involved in sport. And we know a lot more about that through research that's been available to us to understand some of those barriers and some of those obstacles that are in their way. And we must help to eradicate some of those, or at least minimise some of those barriers to participation. So the Her Moves initiative and campaign I'm really passionate about that, and I really believe that will create massive opportunities for girls into the future.
Will we be seeing Her Moves outdoors? Is that coming up this summer as well?
Yeah, that'll be coming up, and we had the Her Moves week there a few weeks ago, where we had a big festival event in the National Indoor Arena, and the LSPs are on board and they're running programs linked to that throughout the year, and we'll have the Her Moves outdoors as well, and lots of initiatives coming up over the summer period. Yeah,
brilliant, great, that's great, thanks.
Super.
Kelsey Kirby, Sport and Development Officer for Motorsport and a motorsport driver yourself. Can you tell me how you got into the sport?
So during lockdown I decided to stop putting things off that I really wanted to do. I've always loved cars, and I decided to book a driving experience for myself in Mondello Park, and the second that I drove out of the pit lane for the first time in a BMW M2, I was like, I'm sold. Did the whole day, absolutely loved it, and then I saved up all of my pandemic unemployment payments and decided to buy buy a car and go racing myself.
Unbelievable. So you were hooked from the very start?
Yeah, like I watched motorsport for years before that, and it was a sport that I thought was never attainable for me. You never really saw a lot of girls in the sport, so I kind of decided, you know what, like if the boys can do it, I can do it too, and I just wanted to go for it from then, and I've been full steam ahead ever since.
And since you started, have you found that there is like a community of girls out there motorsporting that you just didn't know was there?
Yeah, like there is always girls in sport. Even if you don't see them, they're always in the background. And over the years, way more girls have gotten involved as well, which is really great to see. And I think over the next couple of years, we're going to have more female mechanics, engineers, racing drivers, but I want to get more girls involved in the officiating side, the volunteering side, because our sport is so dependent on volunteers as well. I just want to be able to walk around the paddock on a race weekend and see a 50-50 divide of men and women, that it's not split like 90-10 men to women. I just want to see that equality in the sport. And out on track, we all race against each other as hard as we can. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or a boy or a girl. We're all racing for the same piece of the track and to get to the checkered flag first.
Unbelievable. Kelsey, perfect.